95% of the world's watches are made here, including the one you're wearing right now. Many big brand watches are produced or sourced for parts from here. This place is Shenzhen City, the world watch capital city. And in Shenzhen, you must not miss this.
What if the Rolex on your wrist, the same one that costs more than your car, wasn't Swiss at all? What if it came from the same factory pumping out $300 fakes for AliExpress? For decades, luxury watches were untouchable, the ultimate symbol of status. And Rolex? It was the crown jewel. But that illusion just shattered. Not because of a press leak, not because of a lawsuit, but because Drake, yes, that Drake, asked one chilling question that pulled back the velvet curtain on an entire billion-dollar lie. If it's built right, why hide where it's built? And just like that, the fantasy of Swiss craftsmanship began to crumble. Welcome to the scandal the luxury industry never saw coming. You don't buy a Rolex to tell time. You buy it to control the room. And just like that, the illusion begins. Because Rolex isn't a watch brand. It's a personality transplant, a wearable flex. It's the silent language of power that whispers, "I made it," before you ever open your mouth. For over a century, Rolex has positioned itself as the gold standard of timekeeping. The watch of James Bond, CEOs, presidents, oil barons, and old money dynasties. The very name conjures visions of mahogany boardrooms, champagne yachts, and private jets slicing through the clouds. Rolex is more than a brand. It's a status prophecy wrapped around your wrist. But here's the real magic trick. Rolex didn't earn this reputation from innovation. It didn't explode in value because it told time better than anyone else. It rose to dominance because it mastered one thing, the illusion of exclusivity. The price tag? That's just the velvet rope. What you're really paying for is the perception of importance. You see, the Rolex doesn't say you're punctual. It says you're powerful. And that's why billionaires wear them even though they have assistants to manage their calendars. That's why athletes buy them before they buy a house. Because the Rolex isn't a tool, it's a symbol. And symbols? They're priceless until you look a little closer. Cut to a slow zoom on the crown logo. Let's talk about how deep the myth goes. Rolex built its empire not on scarcity, but on controlled scarcity. Despite producing an estimated 1 million watches per year, the brand maintains a global narrative of rarity. Waitlists stretch for years. Customers grovel for the privilege of buying. But here's the thing. Rolex isn't limiting supply because it can't meet demand. It's doing it to manipulate desire. That empty display case at your local boutique? That's theater. A psychological trick designed to make you want the watch more. To make it seem like you're not buying a product. You're being chosen by it. And we eat it up. Because in a world obsessed with status, Rolex isn't selling watches, it's selling belonging. Think about who wears Rolex in media. Movie villains, billionaires, rappers, world leaders. The camera always lingers on that wrist. Because the Rolex tells a story before the plot even begins. It says, this character has weight. And by extension, you want that weight. You want that story. You want the room to stop when you enter. Cut to old Rolex advertisements from the 1980s, full of snowy mountains and deep-sea dives. They sold you the idea that owning a Rolex means you've conquered something. Everest, the Mariana Trench, Wall Street, your childhood trauma. Whatever it is, the Rolex becomes proof that you did it. You overcame. You emerged victorious. And now you wear your trophy. But trophies are just metal. And Rolex? It's stainless steel dressed up like royalty. And here's the punchline. The overwhelming majority of Rolexes, the ones priced at $10,000, $20,000, even $50,000, are made from steel, not gold. But they're priced as if each watch contains a sliver of divine right. Because you're not buying a material, you're buying a narrative. You're buying into the legend that time is money, and that your time, if it's tracked by a Rolex, is worth more than someone else's. So next time you see that glimmer on someone's wrist, don't just ask what time it is. Ask yourself, what story are they trying to tell? Because in the world of luxury, it's not about what you own. It's about who they think you are. And Rolex? Rolex mastered that illusion better than anyone. It started with a TikTok. No press release. No expose. No Business Insider. Just a shaky video, 38 seconds long, shot inside what looked like an ordinary Chinese factory. Fluorescent lights. Concrete floors. Rows of workers hunched over watch parts. Harmless, right? Until someone zoomed in. There, on the table, was the unmistakable glint of a Rolex bezel. And not just one. Dozens. Perfectly polished. Stamped. Branded. Waiting to be cased up and shipped to God knows where. The caption? $50,000 watches, $5 labor. Welcome to the real Switzerland. That one video lit a match the luxury world wasn't ready for. Within hours, the algorithm did its thing. Shares, stitches, reactions. Then came the questions. Was this fake? Was it a dupe shop? Or was this real? Internet sleuths wasted no time. Frame-by-frame breakdowns. Part comparisons. Factory layouts. One user zoomed in and matched a serial number on a Rolex dial to a model that sold for $38,000 on Chrono24. Another pointed out the identical micro-laser engravings Rolex uses for authenticity, engraved right there in the background. But the real twist? These weren't knockoffs. They weren't cheap clones or shady counterfeits. According to a whistleblower who slid into the comment section, this was a contracted parts facility. The same materials, the same machines, the same hands, just not in Switzerland. And that's when the question stopped being about counterfeits and started being about truth. Because if Rolex parts are being milled, stamped, and assembled outside of Switzerland by non-Swiss workers using non-Swiss resources, can they still slap on that sacred Swiss-made label? Turns out, yes. Thanks to a legal loophole, as long as 60% of the value is added in Switzerland, they're in the clear. So you could ship everything in from China, screw it together in Geneva, and boom, Swiss prestige, Chinese price tag. The TikTok became a symbol, a glitch in the matrix. It wasn't about watches anymore. It was about betrayal. About realizing that the luxury we were sold wasn't handcrafted magic. It was outsourced branding. And when the comments started pouring in, that's when it got brutal. I just spent my life savings on a Chinese Rolex. So the only thing Swiss is the price. My AliExpress watch came from the same place, and I paid $89. Silence from Rolex. No denial. No statement. Nothing. And in that silence, the internet answered for them. The myth of Swiss superiority was no longer untouchable. It was being unstitched, dismantled, and fed to the algorithm, one view at a time. Because if the most respected name in luxury can be linked to the same factories producing knockoffs, then what are we really paying for? Just when the internet thought it couldn't get messier, it did. A message dropped in the inbox of a mid-tier watch TikToker. No name, no warning, just a link to a Dropbox folder and a single line of text. If you post this, be ready. They watch everything. Inside, a trove of files, photos, videos, production logs. The kind of stuff brands bury in NDA contracts and offshore warehouses. The kind of stuff that isn't meant to leave the factory floor. And what it revealed was the beginning of a full-blown luxury industry meltdown. The files came from someone claiming to be a former logistics coordinator at a watch parts supplier in Shenzhen. Not some back-alley knockoff shop, but a Tier 1 vendor that allegedly produces components for Rolex, Audemars Piguet, and Richard Mille. That's right, the so-called holy trinity of high horology, the pinnacle of precision, the gatekeepers of the $50,000 wrist game. And according to this whistleblower, more than 60% of their parts aren't even made in Switzerland. Let that sink in. Photos showed trays of dials, hands, bezels, each meticulously labeled for their final destination. Some had model codes matching known Rolex SKUs. Others were etched with AP and RM serial formats. But the most damning detail? Many of the dials were already branded Swiss-made, stamped, engraved, boxed, all before they ever got on a plane. In one video, workers are seen attaching micro-etched crown logos, the same security feature Rolex brags about, to sapphire crystals. In another, a crate full of engraved casebacks labeled Richard Mille, limited edition, being shrink-wrapped for international export. GPS metadata confirmed the location, Dongguan, China. So how does this all fly under the radar? Simple. The Swiss-made label doesn't mean what you think it means. According to Swiss law, only 60% of the value has to come from Switzerland. Not the parts, not the labor, just the value. So if you make the expensive stuff, like the movement or the final assembly, in Geneva, you can legally offshore everything else. Which means a Rolex dial, made in China, an AP case, forged in Southeast Asia, a Richard Mille strap, sewn in a Vietnamese textile hub. As long as the last stop is Swiss soil, it's all fair game. And the luxury industry knows you won't ask questions. They know that when you see that little white tag and velvet box, your brain fills in the fantasy. Swiss mountains, lab coats, magnifying glasses. You're not thinking about outsourced labor and quiet cargo ships. But now the fantasy is crumbling. The whistleblower ended their message with one final note. These brands are built on secrecy, not craftsmanship. Ask yourself, if they were proud of where their watches came from, why do they hide it? Because if the truth came out, the price wouldn't just drop. The entire illusion would implode. Enter Drake. It took one comment. Just one. No press tour. No podcast rant. No flashy statement piece. Just a cold, cryptic reply to a viral TikTok unraveling the luxury watch industry. If it's built right, why hide where it's built? Champagne poppy. That was it. No emojis. No follow-up. No tag. Just 6 words that hit like a bullet in a velvet box. And that's what made it lethal. Because Drake doesn't have to shout. He is the aesthetic. The private jet, the custom Patek, the $500,000 wrist game. He's not watching the luxury space from the outside. He is luxury. So when the man who breathes exclusivity throws shade at the very industry that fuels it, people don't just listen. They panic. Within minutes, blogs picked it up. Hypebeast ran a headline. Rap pages reposted it. Watch forums melted down. The message was simple. If Drake's raising eyebrows at how these watches are made, maybe we all should. Because when the Prince of Opulence questions the throne, you know the crown is slipping. The drop wasn't immediate. It was a slow, collective gasp across a million screens. First, it was Reddit. Watch forums lit up with threads titled, "Is my Rolex even real?" and "Swiss-made?" or "Swiss-played?" Veteran collectors started posting high-res macro shots of their submariners, looking for flaws they were told shouldn't exist. Others pulled out Chinese replicas and noticed they looked identical. Then TikTok caught wind. Sleuths went full forensic, overlaying side-by-sides of $30,000 pieces and $300 clones. The scary part? The lighting had to be perfect to even tell the difference. Dials, markers, lume, screw-down crowns, all indistinguishable. And then came the silence. Influencers, usually loud with wrist rolls and Rolex hauls, went dark. Videos vanished. Unboxing my new date content got suspiciously rare. One reseller posted, "We're pausing all luxury consignments until further notice." Translation? Nobody wants to get caught selling a $20,000 watch made next door to a fake. Even Chrono24 saw listings quietly dip. Trusted sellers knocked a few grand off. Not because the watches changed, but because the myth did. What once felt like the pinnacle of precision now looked like something you could buy wholesale. And just like that, the line between real and replica wasn't about quality anymore. It was about belief. And belief was crumbling one TikTok at a time. Rolex's deafening silence. No statement. No press conference. No sleek behind-the-scenes video to reassure the masses. Not even a stage photo of a Swiss artisan holding a loupe under golden light. Nothing. While the internet dissected every bezel and influencer loyalty began to evaporate, Rolex, the crown, the standard, the myth chose silence. And in that silence, a truth screamed. Because when a billion-dollar empire is accused of offshoring luxury, you'd expect fireworks, receipts, factory tours, a defense. Instead, Rolex watched the chaos from its marble tower and said nothing. And for the first time in decades, that legendary stoicism didn't feel like mystique. It felt like guilt. Public opinion didn't just shift, it collapsed. from reverence to suspicion, from flex to facade. Because in a world trained to worship perfection, silence isn't noble. It's admission. And as the brand once synonymous with precision and purity refused to meet the moment, the myth of Rolex started to look less like legacy and more like a lie. This isn't just about watches. It's not just about Rolex or Omega or the magical word Swiss made getting dragged through the digital dirt. This is about a generational reckoning. And Gen Z? They're not here to play the game their parents worshipped. Luxury, to them, doesn't start with a logo. It starts with proof. Gone are the days when a crown on a dial or a horse-embossed Birkin meant untouchable status. Because this new generation doesn't care what you tell them it's worth. They want to know why. And the old gods? They're scrambling. See, for millennials, luxury was aspiration. It was climbing, earning, flexing. But for Gen Z, luxury without ethics is just a costume, a performance. And no amount of diamond bezels can cover up the fact that your Made in Switzerland tag came off a factory line in Shenzhen. Taglines don't impress anymore. Transparency does. They want receipts, ingredient lists, supply chain maps. They want to know who made it, where, and under what conditions. If it's a $30,000 watch, they want to know why it isn't a $300 one when they can't tell the difference, and maybe came from the same factory. This generation can smell spin from across a server farm. They've watched too many corporations hide behind press releases and recycled brand stories. They've seen influencers push fake gifted items and pretend it's exclusivity. And now, they're flipping the table. Gen Z is turning luxury inside out. They're buying lab diamonds, wearing thrifted vintage, investing in sustainable materials, and calling out $800 t-shirts for what they are. Marketing scams with sleeves. Swiss made, it used to mean elite craftsmanship. Now it reads like a meme, a marketing relic of a pre-digital age. Because when you grow up on the internet, your loyalty isn't to legacy. It's to truth. Gen Z doesn't want the polished showroom story. They want the factory footage, the whistleblower, the TikTok teardown that shows what the brand wants. They're asking dangerous questions. If the luxury supply chain is so clean, why does it keep dodging sunlight? If Rolex really values heritage, why hide the hands making the parts? If Hermes bags are handcrafted in France, why are we seeing Chinese dust in the linings? And those questions are catching fire. Because Gen Z isn't buying your myth. They're investigating it. They're not anti-luxury. They're anti-lies. And they're building a new hierarchy, one where authenticity, traceability, and purpose are the new flex. Where a $50 ethically sourced timepiece can hold more clout than a mass-produced Rolex with a sketchy passport. In this new world, exclusivity doesn't mean hiding the process. It means owning it. So now, the industry stands at a cliff. The old model, prestige through secrecy, is dying. The new one demands a brutal kind of honesty. Because Gen Z, they don't want a story. They want the receipts. And if luxury can't give them that, then luxury becomes the lie they finally outgrew. Collectors, once die-hard loyalists, started off floating their watches in private deals, ghosting the auction houses they used to flaunt. Whispers in forums. Silent listings under burner accounts. The same men who once posted daily wrist shots in luxury lounges suddenly started talking about minimalism and financial rebalancing. But the truth? They saw the writing on the dial. The myth was cracking, and nobody wants to be the last one holding a collapsing illusion. Rolex, Omega, Audemars Piguet, these weren't just brands. They were temples. And now the faithful were slipping out the side doors before the flames reached the altar. The resale market? In free fall. Watch prices that soared during the pandemic crash back to earth like failed crypto coins. Once upon a time, a Daytona could fund a semester at Harvard. Now, collectors are barely breaking even. Some are taking losses just to get out before the truth becomes mainstream. Because it's not just about craftsmanship anymore. It's about credibility. And when that starts to rot, the value collapses right alongside it. Influencers are running too, silently deleting Rolex hashtags, archiving their brand collabs, pivoting to vague lifestyle content while they test the waters with micro brands or vintage rarities. The same creators who once bowed to the algorithm in a three-piece suit and a submariner are now sliding into the comments of ethical watch startups, begging for early access. They don't want smoke when the next expose hits. And they can feel it coming. Because this isn't just a PR crisis. It's a reckoning. Luxury isn't immune. Legacy doesn't mean untouchable anymore. And then, Drake. When Drake moves, industries follow. And what he did wasn't just subtle shade. It was surgical rebellion. One post, one lyric, one subtle switch from Rolex to a lesser-known timepiece. And suddenly, fans were rethinking everything. Drake didn't need a press release. He didn't need to call out anyone directly. All he had to do was pivot. And just like that, the tone shifted. Watch culture, once loud and clout-driven, became a battlefield of quiet exits and nervous justifications. Even luxury insiders admit off the record, the Drake effect hit harder than any expose. Because when someone with that much cultural gravity pulls away from the traditional luxury narrative, it delegitimizes the dream. He made critique cool. He turned skepticism into a movement. And he did it without ever raising his voice. Suddenly, wearing a Rolex doesn't feel aspirational. It feels out of touch. It feels like you didn't get the memo. Like you're still clinging to a fantasy that everyone else quietly walked away from. And now, legacy brands are panicking behind the scenes. They're not just losing sales, they're losing a generation. The people who used to wait years for a waitlisted model are now waiting for the next expose, the next leak, the next TikTok teardown that'll validate what they already suspect, that the luxury they bought into was just another house of cards. And this time, no rebrand or celebrity campaign will save them. Because the real influencers aren't on payroll. They're on Reddit, on TikTok, in DMs and Discords. And they're not buying what Rolex is selling anymore. The fallout isn't just about products. It's about perception. And once you lose that, you're not a luxury brand. You're just another company trying to survive a truth it refused to tell. The existential crisis of luxury. The price of a Rolex isn't just about the watch. It's not about precision, or heritage, or even time itself. It's about belief. Because the real value of luxury, it lives in our minds. A Rolex isn't $15,000 because of the steel, or the movement, or the assembly line in BN. It's $15,000 because we've been conditioned, generation after generation, to see that little crown and assign it meaning. But what happens when the crown loses its power? Because here's the quiet truth that's become too loud to ignore. The price of Rolex might not be for craftsmanship. It might be for marketing, the ads, the airport billboards, the James Bond cameos, the gold-tinted myth of scarcity and Swiss perfection, the illusion. And when you pull back the curtain, what do you find? Factories in China, outsourced components, assembly lines hidden behind legal loopholes and PR gloss. The crown isn't forged. It's printed, duplicated, exported, stamped onto thousands of parts that get flown across oceans and passed off as artisanal legacy. This isn't luxury. It's theater. And maybe it always was. Because luxury, at its core, is a game of agreed-upon lies. It says, this object makes you special. It whispers, this brand is proof you've arrived. But if the watch is made by anonymous hands in an anonymous factory, just like the knockoff you laughed at on Canal Street, what's left to believe in? If the $50 homage and the $15,000 original come off the same supply chain, what are we paying for? The answer? Propaganda. The commercials. The celebrities. The fabricated waiting lists. The illusion of excellence backed by nothing more than brand mythology and our own willingness to believe. Because if we stop believing, if we say the emperor has no dial, then the whole thing collapses. The crown falls. And luxury becomes just another lie we outgrew. And that's the existential crisis facing every high-end brand right now. They're not fighting knockoffs. They're fighting disillusionment. They're not competing with cheaper watches. They're competing with the truth. And once the truth wins, the prestige doesn't matter. Because prestige without authenticity is just propaganda in a velvet box. So ask yourself, if luxury is just a lie we all agree to believe, what happens when we stop believing?